Welcome to the MSDE Social Studies tutorial on using the 5-point rubric in American government. This tutorial is designed to help guide you through the scoring process using the 5-point rubric. It will also show you how to access released response papers to help you practice the application of this 5-point rubric. These are some questions to think about during this tutorial. How does scoring differ from grading? How might I use this in my classroom practice? What do students need to know about the EBUS scoring? So let's begin with these ideas in mind. The 5-point argumentative rubric was developed as a way to assess the evidence-based argument set, or EBUS item, that was created for the American government assessment. Let us take a moment to discuss the skills being assessed in the EBUS item. The EBUS assesses the Maryland Social Studies Standard 6.0 skills and processes. It was determined the best portion of this standard to place on an assessment would be the evaluate sources and share conclusions portion of the standard. While the other pieces of the inquiry arc and standard 6.0 are important, they are difficult to score on a standardized statewide assessment. To evaluate a source, students must weigh the type, origin, authority, and context to help determine the credibility of a source. Then, students will use more than one source to corroborate the information presented. In American government, selected response items are used to assess the student's ability to source information. To share their conclusion, students have a constructed response in which they must develop a claim and use evidence to help support their claim. There are many approaches to source evaluation. The MSDE has created several crosswalks to demonstrate the assessed skills in comparison with other approaches. Currently, there are crosswalks developed using SHAG, AP Parts, and Soapstone. Please check out the Social Studies page on marylandpublicschools.org for more information. Now, on to scoring. The MCAP government assessment has two rubrics, a 4-point content rubric and a 5-point rubric for the EBUS items. So what is the purpose of a rubric on a standardized test? First, it's important to note that both of our rubrics are holistic rubrics. The rubrics clearly define each score point that a student can earn. It does this by providing a framework for what is expected in a student response. It is also important to note that the rubric provides for a range of responses within a given score point. When using the 5-point rubric or the 4-point rubric, it is important to remember the differences between everyday grading in your classroom and standardized scoring. When you are grading, it is on a small scale. It is for your classroom assessments that evaluate specific knowledge that you have taught. Grading is based on expectations for that class and group of students. Ultimately, grading helps to establish a grade for the student, and it is a tool to provide opportunities for formative feedback. While scoring is done on a much larger scale, it is for a statewide assessment that determines yearly progress or end-of-course progress in the case of American government. It is based on standardized expectations, in this case, from the state social studies standards and assessment limits. Scores are created for statewide populations, and the score provides for summative data. This is the American government 5-point rubric. You will see that each score point is defined and provides the expectation for that score point. Let us spend a few minutes reviewing the language of some of the score points. In order to earn the highest score point, a 5, the student response demonstrates a substantial understanding of the content, question, and/or problem. The response is insightful and completely integrates knowledge to thoroughly answer the question. The response develops a comprehensive claim, addressing the compelling question. Supports claim with full synthesis, citing evidence from all appropriate sources, and connection to the claim is substantial. Minor misconceptions do not interfere with understanding. If we go to the level 3, we can see that the response shows a general understanding of the content, question, and/or problem. The response is adequate and integrates knowledge to fully answer the question, develops a general claim addressing the compelling question, supports a claim with some synthesis behind at least one source, with minor misconceptions interfere with the understanding. So from that level 5 to the level 3, we can see that there are a few variations. First, we go from substantial understanding to general understanding. Another difference we see in that bullet 1, a level 5 response should have that comprehensive claim, whereas a level 3 response, that it might be a general claim. In a level 5, we want full synthesis and all appropriate sources. Note, it doesn't say all sources, just all that are appropriate to support their claim. Whereas in a level 3, we want a claim with some synthesis behind at least one of the sources. Then finally, if we go down all the way to a level 1, we can notice a few more differences between those levels. The response shows minimal understanding of the content, question, and/or problem. The response is related to the question but is inadequate. May develop a partial claim that relates to the compelling question or lack a claim. References information from sources. Significant misconceptions. So we're not going to go through each score point, but you might, if you have not spent time with the 5-point rubric, you may want to spend a few more minutes. You may want to pause and to read through level 4, level 2, and level 0. To discuss the scoring using the 5-point rubric, we are going to use the EBUS item that was developed for the MSDE COG Lab. The COG Lab was created to test drive the EBUS item to make sure that it worked with students. The MSDE and testing vendor went to schools around the state to have students pilot the item, and then the MSDE scoring team scored the items. Currently, this is the only released EBUS that has anchor responses. In the 2020-2021 school year, there will be another EBUS item released with anchors and practice papers. For this activity, we are going to access this EBUS from the MSDE released question bank on the iTempera website. Please open another tab in your browser and then navigate to itempera.org/Maryland or /MD. This is the home page for the iTempera content banking system. For this scoring activity, we will navigate to the public released modules. Please scroll down to find the public access link and click. This is the public released modules page for MSDE. To organize the page for easier access, click on the collection. This will reorder the collection in alpha order. Government will come to the top of the list. To select the NAFTA eBus, click on the View icon, or the I, next to the module title. In this module, you will find all aspects of the eBus item: the compelling question, the background information, the sources, the multiple choice or selected response sourcing questions, and the constructed response item. We are going to spend most of our time interacting with question 6, the constructed response item. The constructed response item is simply the compelling question that the students have been interacting with throughout the entire eBus item. If you have not seen the NAFTA question prior to the scoring activity, please make sure you pause the video to review the eBus item to gain a better understanding of the expectations for the question. And I'm going to spend a moment just shrinking down all of the sources and the background information that I've expanded. So now I just have the compelling question, and then if I open up question 6, I'll see the constructed response, and again, these are the same. Okay? The compelling question is what students are going to be answering in the constructed response item. The scoring rubric is also found in this folder. We are not going to review this again, but we will be referencing it. The next folder is the scored students' responses. Here, we have one anchor response for each score point. These are responses that have been scored by the MSDE scoring team that fall into the parameters of the specified score point. The last folder, Papers for Discussion folder, these response papers do not have scores displayed. This is so you can practice scoring the papers with the rubric. Prior to scoring on your own, it is always helpful to see scored responses. So we are going to review 3 anchor papers together. Let's go to the Scored Student Responses folder and expand. For the first 2 anchors, I'm going to read the response and then think aloud about how I would score the anchor based upon the rubric. We will begin with the score point 1 anchor. The NAFTA has resulted in the creation of 200,000 export-related jobs annually in the United States. Those new jobs pay between 15 to 20% more than the manufacturing jobs lost after NAFTA was implemented. The U.S. auto industry lost approximately 350,000 jobs from 1994 to 2016. Many of those jobs were taken by workers in Mexico. The auto industry in Mexico added over 400,000 jobs during the same period. All right, first thing that I noticed is this response lacks a claim. So if I go to my rubric, the first thing that I see in a level 1 is, in the first bullet, may develop a partial claim that relates to the compelling question or lacks a claim. So in this response, we see a lack of a claim. You go up to a level 2, in order to receive a level 2, a student must have a claim, at least a partial claim that addresses the compelling question. I also notice that it does include facts in this response. So, and those facts are from source D. However, it just restates the information. There's no reasoning, there's no synthesis behind any of these facts. So overall, this response demonstrates a minimal understanding of the compelling question. If you notice the paperclip, this is the annotation feature. By clicking on the paperclip, you will see a scoring annotation very similar to the rationale we just discussed. If you simplify, you will see this text is linked directly to the rubric. So it explains the anchor paper or the paper using the language directly from the rubric. If you show the details, you will then see this purplish color. And here, it will show you the specific evidence that the response is using to get to that score point in the rubric. Now, let's move ahead to the score point 3 anchor paper. The North American Free Trade Agreement is not beneficial for the United States. People in the US who worked for the auto industry lost their job because of the NAFTA. So that means people have to look for another job that's not their skill, which is hard. And they don't have enough money to support themselves. The US is losing money because of it, and Mexico is making a lot of money because the auto industry in Mexico has added over 400,000 jobs for the auto industry in Mexico. In source D, it says that for the cons of NAFTA. So the NAFTA is not beneficial for the US, but it is for Mexico. First thing you will notice is a claim, followed by evidence from one source. So we see NAFTA is not beneficial here in the first line. And then here, there is some cause and effect showing the synthesis of the evidence. The student shows the US is losing money, Mexico is making money. And ultimately, it's not good because people have to find another job. Now, what this paper does not do is use another source, which is why we're going to see it stalls at the 3-level score point. So if we go back up to the rubric here and go to our level 3, and we see supports claim with some synthesis behind at least one source. In order to get to that next score point, that level 4, if we go to the second bullet, we see reflects thoughtful synthesis in supporting claim with evidence from several appropriate sources. But connection to claim may be unevenly developed. So they have to move on and use at least one more source. The source connections might not be even in how they're using it. However, they still must have a second source in order to get to that level 4. Finally, let's look at the score point 5 anchor. For this anchor, you are going to read the student response on your own. While you are reading, find where the student demonstrates the 5-point level requirements. Remember to use the rubric to help determine how the student has met the rubric requirements. Please pause the video while you are reading. To double check that you have found all of the level 5 scoring parameters, use the scoring annotation. Please pause the video while you're double checking to make sure that you found all of the score points. Make sure you review the other 3 anchor papers. You may either pause the video now or come back when you have completed the entire tutorial. Now we will move on to the discussion folder. These response papers do not have scores displayed. This is so you can practice scoring the papers using the rubric. Once you have scored the paper, you can compare your score with the MSDE scoring team. Remember to click on the scoring annotation button so you can see the score and the rationale behind that score. You may pause the video now and score, or come back at the end of the tutorial to score these responses. It is important to remember that there is a range of scoring responses at each level. There are many ways to arrive at a 5, a 4, a 3, a 2, or even a 1. In fact, part of the test development process is to conduct a range finding session where Maryland teachers review about 100 papers for each CR, constructed response question, to determine the range of papers at each of the scoring points. A few other notes before we end our tutorial. To review the eBus, we used iTempera. However, the item does render differently on the testing platform. Make sure that you and your students have had time to use the testing platform and are familiar with the features available. Now that you've had some time to explore scoring, take a few moments to reflect on these initial questions. Thank you for using the tutorial.